600,000 years ago, temperatures sank and Europe was covered by 1 kilometer thick glaciers. 30,000 years ago, early hunters left traces of their stone and bone weapons and tools in various natural caves. Around 3000 BC, lake dwellers erected houses made of wood and clay on posts on the shores of Swiss lakes. By 2000 BC, copper, hardened by 10% tin, formed an alloy called bronze, which replaced the stone and bone weapons and tools. By 1000 BC, iron, which was stronger, harder, lighter, and easier to mine, but requiring much higher temperatures to melt than bronze, replaced bronze. Around 500 BC, a Celtic tribe from the east, called the Helvetians, colonized Switzerland. The Celts were ancient peoples of Europe that lived during the Iron Age. The Romans from the south eventually gained control of Switzerland and its 200,000 inhabitants. They were pushed out at about 400 AD by the Germanic tribes, which were called barbarians. The Germanic tribes from the east and north, called the Burgundians and the Alamanen, joined the Helvetians, who over the centuries adopted their culture and language. 400 AD to 800 AD was dominated by small kingdoms, dukes, and local noblemen who set up a feudal system and founded monasteries for political, social, and religious purposes. In 1291, in the middle of the Dark Ages, and just before the 100 Years' War that was playing out in the rest of Europe, the valley communities of the Central Alps made an alliance not to fight amongst each other. Their motto was "One for all and all for one." The neighboring warring countries in Europe welcomed this new buffer zone between them because it facilitated management of common interests like trade and tourism and ensured peace on the important mountain trade routes. The expansion led to increased power and wealth for this confederation of these people called Helvetii. They acquired a reputation of invincibility, characterized by their folk hero William Tell, and all the other cantons in the Confederacy inherited this reputation. They all became known as the Swiss, and their invincible country as Switzerland. In 1349, the Black Death, one of the worst pandemics in human history, killing half of the population, reached Switzerland, and the Swiss blamed the Jews for starting it. The Swiss accused the Jews of poisoning water wells. A systematic extermination program was started, and Jews were burnt alive at the stake, and their wealth was expropriated. This fear, hatred, blame, extermination, and expropriation spread with the plague to the rest of Europe like a wildfire. By 1460, Confederation of Helvetia controlled most of the territory south and west of the Rhine to the Alps and the Jura Mountains. The Alpine people, especially from the cantons in the middle called Schwyz, were very strong and highly demanded as mercenaries. In 1480, 100 Swiss were selected as bodyguards of the French king. They were called the Swiss Guard. Their service later expanded to include guarding the Pope, the head of the Catholic Church. While other countries separated church from state, Switzerland embraced it as a welfare agency responsible for providing welfare to those that fall through the state-sponsored welfare net and end up on the streets. Between 1523 and 1536, Zwingli from Zurich and Calvin from Geneva, both much more radical than Martin Luther from Germany, started a movement to reform the Catholic Church of its open and widespread corruption. This reformation divided Switzerland into two factions, Protestants and Catholics. The conservative Central Switzerland remained Catholic and started the Order of Jesuits, which was dedicated to fight the Reformation. Switzerland became an asylum for the many Protestants persecuted in inquisitions of cruel tortures in France, Italy, Spain, and Britain. Many of these refugees were skilled goldsmiths, watchmakers, and bankers. In 1648, other European countries recognized Switzerland's neutrality and independence from the head of the Holy Roman Empire, the Catholic Church. This helped fuel the Protestant movement headed by Martin Luther of Germany. The 30 Years' War, fought by all the European countries between Catholics and Protestants, had greatly benefited Switzerland, who stayed out of the fighting and provided provisions for the fighters. When the fighting stopped, the Swiss suffered a sudden decline in their income, which was not reflected in their taxes, so they rebelled. The rebellion was put down in 6 months, but the ruling cities nevertheless made concessions that ended up uniting the Swiss more than they were before the conflict. In 1798, the revolutionary French government conquered Switzerland and imposed a new unified constitution which was very unpopular. When war broke out between France and its rivals, Russian and Austrian forces invaded Switzerland. The Swiss refused to fight alongside the French. Convinced that the Swiss were too conservative to change, the European powers agreed in 1815 to permanently recognize Swiss neutrality. In 1847, when some of the Catholic cantons tried to set up a separate alliance, civil war broke out. It only lasted a few weeks, but it convinced most Swiss of the need for unity and strength towards its European neighbors. Swiss people from all states of society, Catholics, Protestants, conservatives, and liberals, realized that the cantons would profit more if their economic and religious interests were merged. Thus, while the rest of Europe was plagued by revolutionary uprisings, the Swiss drew up a constitution in 1848 which provided for a federal layout, much of it inspired by the American example. This constitution provided for a central authority while leaving the cantons the right to self-government on local issues. They built a building for the parliament in Bern and took 50 years to make it beautiful. It housed both upper house representing the 26 cantons and the lower house of politicians who legislated laws on behalf of the people. 4 languages were protected and made official languages of Switzerland: German, French, Italian, and Rheto-Roman, an old Latin dialect. Switzerland was not invaded during either of the world wars. In 1920, Switzerland joined the League of Nations, which was based in Geneva, on the condition that it was exempt from any military requirements. When the Jews of Germany were trying to escape extermination just before World War II, the Swiss pressured the German government to have their passports marked with a J so that Jews could be easily detected and rejected when they tried to enter Switzerland. The Germans ended up exterminating the Jews and expropriating their wealth. They removed the gold fillings from their teeth before they were burnt in ovens and placed the gold for safekeeping in Swiss banks. During World War II, Switzerland was never attacked. The banks refused to return the gold after the war because papers documenting where all the gold really came from were missing.